Hello and welcome to the new limited Farm Safety Survivor series brought to you by Agriland in association with AXA and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, where we will hear from farm accident survivors sharing their stories and from experts in the areas of livestock, machinery, slurry and mental health. My name is Rubina Freiberg and today I'm joined by Longford beef and dairy farmer Mervyn Clendenning, who fell unconscious after he was overcome by slurry fumes in 2021. I'll also be joined by Jason Murray, who's an inspector with the Health and Safety Authority. Mervyn, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Before we talk about the incident, would you mind giving us a little bit of insight into yourself and the farm here in Longford?
Yeah, I farm here in Rockspring, just 2 mile outside Longford town with me good wife Iris and a son's help and the daughters. It was a family run farm with one person giving me a hand twice or three times a week. And it was in August 21 when the accident happened. And the man came to agitate, and we thought he mightn't agitate. He put the agitator into the tank, and it upset the fumes, the gases in the slat house, and the milking parlour and the cubicle house and all is in the one roof. And it came up pipes and into the milking parlour where we were standing. And we had only one row of cows to milk if we waited, but we didn't anyway. So the fumes. Have a brother with partially blind, and he does come down to give me a hand, or he stands in the parlour. And he said to me, he said, was there an awful smell of the fumes? And I just said to him, oh, you're only imagining that. It's not much of a smell. But in 2-3 seconds after, I realised that the smell was bad. And I said to him, come on, we get out of here. Leave the cows, they're good enough. So he went up the steps first, and I was on my way up the steps, and I was at the top of the steps when you think I got hit with a hammer on the head. I just lost pure control of myself, and I fell back down into the pit, and I banged my head off the ground. And you could get the smell at that stage of the fumes. So I was unconscious, and he ran up to the house to get my wife, who works with the HSE, and she understood that I had taken a heart attack. And she was coming down the yard, and she was ringing for the ambulance at the same time. And she came down not knowing that it was the slurry gases that had knocked me out. And when she came down into the pit, she remembers nothing, only being lifted up out of the pit. She got knocked out as well. So we, both of us were lying in the pit. So the man that was agitating, with his help and the help from my daughter, who was over, she was married in Roscommon, and they had a little baby boy, and she came over for the evening to us. And that was her episode. She had to help lift us out. So they got us out anyway, and the ambulance that came for me, that my wife had rang for, said that there was no need in bringing me, that she was far more critically ill. She was getting convulsions, and she was jumping 2 foot off the ground or more. So they rang another ambulance. So the two ambulances, to put Iris in one and me in the other. And I remember being put into the ambulance all right, because I played football against a weird man that was a paramedic on the ambulance. And my wife was gone ahead with the ambulance in the other ambulance. And we have a good neighbour, Des Mahan, over the road, and his son is a male nurse. And they could see all the commotion of the cars going up and down the avenue. And he came over, and when he went back to the mother, this happened at 7 o'clock in the evening, and he came back to the mother and father at 10 o'clock, and they were worried over their mind that there was anything wrong with us, because we were good neighbours all our lives. And he said to them, Mammy, he said, pray like you never prayed before for Iris. He said, I have a funny feeling Iris is in a serious condition. He said, I think Mervyn will make it. We were that bad. So we were brought to Mullingar Hospital, and I was brought up to theatre to get stitches. I got 14 stitches in the back of my head. And I was brought back down to the ward. And in the ward opposite me there was fierce commotion, doctors running in and out, and nurses, and they were with trolleys and that. And sure, I said to myself, whoever's in that bed is in a serious condition, they'll hardly make it. And sure, not knowing that it was my own wife, and she was brought up to intensive care then, and she was in induced coma for 2 days. Now had gained consciousness at that stage. So she doesn't remember 2 days or more. And she was in a bad way for a long time after. She was sore all over, so she was. But lucky enough, we made it through anyway, and we're here to tell the story. I didn't actually think that the fumes were as serious as they were. I didn't realise it had happened to me, how serious they were, no.
And on the day of the accident, you said it was late in the day, was it?
It was 7 o'clock in the evening when we were finishing the milking of the cows.
And what was the timeline then, just in terms of the slurry was being agitated, you noticed the smell, and then it all must have happened fairly quickly after
Oh, it all
that.
happened. He stopped the agitator then, the contractor, and came up, and he left it Iris and I out of the pit along with Jacqueline, as I said earlier.
And the parlour is attached to the shed?
The parlour is attached to the shed, and there's pipes taking an effluent from the milking parlour and milk washings, and the washings of the milk tank all goes down into this slatted tank, and there was pipes, and it came up one of the pipes and into the pit of the parlour where we were working. Where we reckon that's where it came from anyway.
I understand it's the contractor that came to your help then to rescue yourself.
Oh, he was on instantly, because he was there at the far end of the shed. He was only a couple of 100 meters away from us.
And at that time, the slurry gases weren't as potent anymore?
No, they weren't. It had got over the initial surge of fumes. But we were there for the initial one. We were there for the start of it.
And you mentioned the recovery journey of your wife, which obviously was fairly long and significant and very difficult. What was your own recovery journey like, considering your head injury?
Oh, the head injury was all right. It was, I hurt my chest and heart with the initial shock that I got so the doctor said anyway. And I'm still on treatment for that.
Oh, okay. So there are long-term effects.
Oh, there is long-term effects. My wife wasn't well she was in an awful state for 6 months, but she managed to pull over. I saw that I pulled over myself as well, but I'm on tablets now anyway to help curtail my heart. It affected it with the effluent, the fumes.
And that was the first incident ever in relation to slurry that happened?
Oh, correct. I never had an incident like that before. Never realised, as I said to you earlier on, that it was so potent. It was the same now as I ran into a brick wall. I couldn't get another foot when I got up and out of the parlour. I couldn't get another foot to get fallen in on top of the parlour. I fell back down into the pit. Oh, I had total uncontrol of myself. I couldn't control it at all.
It was a lucky escape, like you said earlier.
Yeah, we're very, very, very lucky. A lot of people don't be so lucky to be able to tell the tale. But you get nightmares of it after. You get after, like an earthquake, aftershocks. But I'm all right now.
And just in terms of looking back at the time before the incident and now, how has that changed your attitude towards farm safety, and particularly when it comes to handling slurry?
Well, big time it has. There definitely would be no agitator let into the tank till everyone is out of the shed. That's a certainty. That's the one thing I learned from it anyway. I learned it the dear way, but I learned it anyway, that you cannot be in the shed while that initial first 10 or 15 minutes, to tell me, I'm not an expert on it, but to say that that's the most dangerous time is the first 10 or 15 minutes when you're agitating, that to stay out of the shed. And it was funny that there was a row of cows left in the parlour for hours and not a thing happened to them. And they're usually, there was 12 cows in the parlour. When this all happened, they had only one row to milk, but that row stood there for hours and hours till my son let them out and put them back out into the paddock with the rest of the cows. But you'd imagine that something would have happened to them as well, that they would have died with the fumes, but they didn't. They survived. They had no effect.
And since the incident, obviously every year now, are you taking any additional precautionary measures? Has your approach
Well, I'm
changed?
taking the precautionary measures that when the agitator is in the tank and we start mixing, that we stand well away. I have a monitor now I haven't it used to have a monitor to monitor the gas, the few gases. It's the monitor you put on you strap it on you and it'll tell you whether there's gases in the shed or not. It'll trigger off a little beep and
you're agitating the slurry yourself now?
yeah, I've got an agitator myself to do it myself.
I might bring you in here now, Jason. So slurry obviously presents two particular risks and deaths, gas poisoning and drowning. So to protect themselves against those risks, what precautions should farmers be taking before agitating slurry and during the agitation process?
So first of all, before I start, I'd like to compliment Mervyn on telling a story here today. It can be very difficult for people to relive the situations that they have gone through. So for preparation for farmers when agitating slurry, so over the past 10 years, between 2014 and 2023, there have been 7 deaths associated with slurry pits. Not removing livestock from slash sheds prior to agitating is one of the biggest risks taken by farmers. In these situations, farmers could be running to their death. A single lungful of hydrogen sulfide can kill a person. As we're in the second week of October, farmers can start now planning and preparing for spreading slurry in the opening dates in January. Preparation and planning are key tools for farmers when agitating slurry. Before you start, take a moment to stop and think. Think about the job you are going to do and make preparations to do the entire task safely. Ensure the tractor, agitator and tanker are in good condition. For example, brakes, tyres, and the agitator and tanker have fully functional PTO covers. Avoid smoking and naked flames, as gas mixture can be highly flammable when agitating. Put up warning signs of the dangers when working with slurry. Only agitate where there is good air movement. Open all doors and outlets to provide a draft. Keep all people away out of the area that has been agitated for at least 30 minutes after starting to agitate. If the agitator is moved to a different manhole, also allow 30 minutes after starting to agitate before entering the building. When possible, always agitate from external agitating points firstly. Everyone on the farm must be made aware that you are agitating and you are all advised to keep well away. When agitating, ensure all openings are covered to prevent someone from falling into the tank. So gas monitors and detectors should not be used solely as the only means of providing adequate levels of safety in order to protect from the exposure of slurry gases. Slurry gases are produced at fatal concentration levels very quickly, and sometimes this can be done before the monitor can react. Gas detection units systems also require expert maintenance, calibration and storage. The area should be left to ventilate naturally for approximately 30 minutes, depending on the size of the tank, after agitating before people enter the building.
That's really where the communication part comes in, letting everyone know at the site that this agitating is underway. And you said 30 minutes then.
Yeah, so that is the recommended 30 minutes. So communication, not only with employees on some of the bigger farms in the country, but also communication with family members, say older generation, younger generation people. Some of the younger generation, say children on farms, are not aware of what's going on, and sometimes they might run through the shed because it's the quickest way from the farmyard to the house. And unfortunately, sometimes this can have detrimental effects.
Absolutely. And you obviously mentioned good air movement, making sure livestock is outside. And you said to yourself there that this is the risk that farmers would be most likely to take, that they would run back in to save their livestock.
Yeah, so basically, it would be the natural instinct of farmers. We've heard of cases where basically animals have fallen in the shed due to the gases, and they wouldn't even think of turning off the agitator. The first thing they do is try and run in, open the gates and get the cattle out as quick as possible. And they're not actually thinking of themselves in the spur of the moment.
And when agitating slurry, it'd be important to make sure it's at least two people. What would you?
Yeah, so it is recommended that you have 2 people But the only thing is, when you have two people, is make sure that the second person that is there is kept well away and they're aware that you're agitating slurry, but they're not around the facilities when you're doing it.
And then just when it comes to slats and inspecting slats, for cracks or sagging, what would your advice be there?
So first of all, in terms of changing slats, there is a need to replace the slats before they actually fail. It's important because this is to eliminate injury to the animals, but more importantly to yourself. It's important that all slats and manhole covers should be inspected carefully for cracks, saggings, and should be replaced if required. Every year, farmers should thoroughly clean the slats, including external manhole covers, and examine them for sagging, cracking, rust, staining, and spalling of the concrete. What I mean by this is the breaking of layers or pieces of concrete from the surface. The telltale signs that slats are in dangerous condition are significant cracks, lengthways and crossways, both on the side and the underside of the slats. The corrosion of slats comes from the tank underneath the shed. Most slats I have seen that have deteriorated from underneath upwards and eventually exposing the metal. It is critical to contact the manufacturer of the slats to discuss the life expectancy of them. It is critical to get an expert to inspect the slats. They will have a camera. They can feed through the slats to inspect the underside of them to determine the amount of spalling of concrete away from the slat. By getting an expert and the use of a camera, there is no need for the tank to be emptied, and more importantly, there will be no need for anyone to actually enter into the tank. One of our main concerns will be farmers considering entering the tank to check the slats. This is an absolute no-go area. And also, for people that are thinking of changing the slats, there is funding available from the Department of Agriculture in relation to this process.
And the advice would be inspecting them once a year, preferably more, because you obviously, you want to check them before.
So once a year preferably would be the required time to check them, but it would be it'd be very important that they are cleaned, because if the slats aren't cleaned, you won't be able to see the cracks with basically the dirt on them. And
just you mentioned earlier, obviously, external agitation points. Could you just talk a bit about the importance of having an external agitation point? Yeah, so external agitation points are very, very important. The reason why they are so important is basically if you're using internal agitating points, the farmers tend to go in to move the agitator around to basically change the flow of the slurry within the tank. Unfortunately, when some of these farmers are in these facilities, there is a high chance that they will become exposed to these gases, unfortunately, sometimes leading to detrimental effects. And just in terms of obviously the risk with slurry gases and the potential of gas poisoning, what is the timeline here? You obviously mentioned 30 minutes after the agitation process started, but how could you just paint a picture of how quickly that can affect a farm? In terms of the gas agitating, so it's only a recommendation of 30 minutes, but that's also dependent on the actual size of the tanks as well. So basically, in terms of it, when you start agitating, when you break the crust, that's when the gases become at their highest levels. So basically, if a farmer enters the shed after breaking the crust or only after starting to agitate within a couple of minutes, basically one lungful of gas could lead to death at that situation. And you mentioned a gas monitor there earlier, and it shouldn't be the only, obviously, precautionary measure, but how could it help? Could help farmers as a precautionary measure, or would your advice be more against a gas meter? So the advice would be, to be honest with you, it would be to stay out of the shed for at least 30 minutes, depending on the size of the tank. As said already, the gas monitors and detectors, they need to be calibrated, they need to be stored in certain conditions. So unfortunately, on some farms, this calibration doesn't happen and they're not stored in the perfect facilities. So you cannot depend on the actual gas monitor itself. And just in summary then, Jason, you obviously said we're currently in the close period through spreading. The season will open again from January on. What measures can farmers take now to prepare? So basically, as we said, we are in the close period at the moment, where farmers can start to plan. So basically look at their external agitating points, see do they need to be changed before the opening period comes again. As we know, sometimes there can be a waiting list to get this equipment. So now is the time to start planning. But in terms of the summary then, in the period of 2000 to 2010,
30% of child fatal accidents on farms were caused by drowning in slurry or water. In the same period, 8% of deaths to elderly farmers were caused by drowning. So, before handling slurry, farmers must think about the job they are doing and make preparations to do the job safely. Always assume hazardous gases are present during mixing. When handling slurry, you should always think about ventilation. Choose a windy day. Open all doors and outlets. Evacuate all people and livestock from the buildings. Keep manholes closed at all times to prevent people falling in. Do not enter the sheds for at least 30 minutes after agitating has started. And as stated, if the agitating is moved to a different manhole, also allow 30 minutes from the starting point of that agitating process in that manhole. Never stand close to the pump exhaust of the tanker when it is filling. Ensure the PTO guards on the slurry tanker and agitator are fully functional. And remember, people entering slurry tanks is a no-go area. And from the HSA e-learning website, we have a training video which is named with the name of Farm Safely with Slurry. This video will help farmers plan and prepare for slurry spreading. It provides an opportunity for farmers to increase their awareness of the dangers associated with slurry.
Okay, Jason, and then you obviously mentioned that entering a slurry tank is a no-go ever. Just wondering about the use of a breathing apparatus.
Yes, so the use of a breathing apparatus, it should be used by competent and expert people. So basically, the breathing apparatus itself that the competent people and the experts use has its own air-fed system. So basically, these systems are quite expensive, and realistically, farmers won't have these systems. But one thing in terms of the apparatus, it's sort of an idea out there that when farmers wear face masks, that these seem to work. That is absolutely a no-go. These face masks do not work. If people are going to have to enter a tank, it needs to be done by a competent person. It needs to be done by an expert. They have to have the appropriate breathing apparatus as required.
Thank you very much. That's Jason Murray, Inspector with the Health and Safety Authority, and thank you very much, Mervyn Clendenning, for sharing your story.